We kick off the show, though, with the greatest special teams player of all time. Steve Tasker joins us from One Bills Live in Orchard Park in Buffalo, where the Bills and Bengals are set to meet on Sunday. Steve, great to have you on the show as we kick off this afternoon preview. Hope everything is going well.
Yeah, everything's going really well here. Thanks for having me on, guys.
What is the atmosphere like in Buffalo compared to the playoff teams when you were going through year after year, and the expectation that, well, the Bills season really started last weekend?
Yeah, the regular season, I think, for most of this year was kind of a formality, which is, if you look at the other teams in the AFC side of it, the Chiefs, the Bengals, and the Bills are all in the same boat. I think Jacksonville's probably pleasantly surprised, and maybe you can feel like they're playing with house money a little bit now, but nevertheless, they're making a run at it, and they've got every reason to think that they may be able to be one of those teams that could go into Kansas City and score with the Chiefs and kind of hang in there with them, maybe steal a win. Here in Buffalo, the excitement's at an all-time high. They got a lot of faith in the guys they've got on the field. The Bills, it's been a long time since anybody has outplayed this Bills team. Now, they've got a few losses, but when they lose, it seems to be by 3 or fewer points, and they look at themselves and say, man, we let that one get away, and their fans feel the same way. They're a tough team to beat. And over the last 29 games they've played, they've lost 5 times, 2 in overtime, and the other 3 losses were by a total of 8 points. So they're tough to beat. And that's kind of the way they roll into this game. Certainly there's a lot of angst and issues with this Cincinnati team coming in. They go very deep at wide receiver, and the Bills secondary has been nicked up, and it hasn't been the same 5 guys as they thought it was going to be when the season kicked off. But they are getting a little healthier, and they feel a little bit better at it. And Cincinnati's offensive line is nicked up. So hopefully that'll give the Bills defense a little bit better chance at defending the pass from the other end rather than the secondary.
Let's stick with that atmosphere theme. Western New York is all Bills all the time. We know that, especially now in the playoffs. I think America is now Bills country right now, Steve. I really think that this team has become America's team because of not winning the Super Bowl ever, because people like the fan base. And now with Damar Hamlin, if your team's not playing in these playoffs, we get the sense that football fans are really rooting on the Buffalo Bills to go all the way and win the Super Bowl. Can you feel that there within that Western New York bubble, that there's a palpable amount of energy from fans all over the country that's now rooting for the Bills?
Well, I think it's certainly gratifying, and certainly you can understand why with what happened to Damar Hamlin and the national attention it got. It happened on a game where 25 million people ended up watching it. There were 20 million people tuned in, and then when Damar went down and it seemed like it was going to be something more so than we've ever seen before, 5 million more people tuned in to get it. It was a bad night, and it led to some very, very difficult days for this franchise over the next 72 hours after that game. I don't know that unless they would have gotten positive news from Damar's doctors and the Cincinnati doctors, that they would have felt like they could have suited up and played against the Patriots the next week. It was a bad situation here in Buffalo, but they got through it. I still think there was a little bit of hangover last week in the Dolphin game. I don't think they were quite on point like you would like to see them. But this week feels much more normal. You can feel them stretching a little bit. The attitude has been great from the get-go. And, yeah, I think the atmosphere and the attention they got from the country really did go a long way towards helping this team heal up. I think there was a great sense of unity around our country, that because of the climate we live in, political climate we live in, unity is a kind of a rare thing. And I think it was a breath of fresh air for a lot of people to be unified for something that was so heartfelt and worthy. Having said that, Damar's got a long way to go. There's plenty of other people cheering for the Bengals, and you still got to play these games. So whether the country's behind the Bills or not, they've got a fan base that is never going to give up on them, and they still have to play a very good football team on Sunday at 3.
Spoken as a true player and competitor, Steve Tasker, former Bills player, now Bills reporter, joining us here on Outkick 360. When you watch the Bills play poorly, and we've talked about it this week, they didn't play that well against Miami, but they survived, they advanced. Do you feel, as someone who follows this team so closely but also played the game, that, okay, we got that bad performance out of our way now let's go play well in the next one, or do you watch it and get a little bit nervous that this team hasn't played all that great lately?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't really get nervous about it. I know they've got an enormous engine up here under the hood. They've over the course of this last season, they've been 4-1 in games where they turned the ball over 3 times. They're 4-1 in those games. The rest of the National Football League was 12-62 in games where one team turned it over 3 times. They only won 12 times, and they were 12-62. The Bills have a big margin of error because of Josh and because of the way they can score and because of the quality of their defense overall. They don't give up big plays very often. They're really solid. They make great adjustments during game with a very veteran coaching staff, both offensively and defensively. They're just a tough team to get out in front of. And the way they played last week against the Miami Dolphins, I think a little of it, and a lot of people will point to Josh Allen throwing a couple of interceptions. I think one of them was a tipped interception where he's trying to get the ball to Cole Beasley. He's right on the money, but a guy got his arm in and bounced right into the hands of a defender. Okay, that's fine. And then the bad throw was the one deep over the top that was really on a clear-out route that Josh was just taking a chance and thought it was probably going to be incomplete, but it ended up coming back the other way. Not just Josh, but then also you got a long dropped pass by Khalil Shakir that would have changed that game. You also had a big drop later in the game. So a couple of drops, which were drop touchdown by Dawson Knox in the end zone that was very close, was called a touchdown, and they took it off the board. You don't draw, so 2 other guys have some mistakes that also added to the mix. I think that's part of the reason I think they were still hanging a little bit from the emotional problems they had coming back from the Damar Hamlin issues. I still think they weren't 100% themselves, even through the week of preparation, and I think it showed itself on Sunday. I don't expect that to be the case this week against the Bengals. I think this is a team that will put its best foot forward. If they do, in this building here in Buffalo, that's a big ask for the Bengals to come in and beat them.
Steve Tasker, our guest on Outkick 360. The big addition from last year's playoff team to this one was Von Miller defensively. He's, of course, out. Where have they felt his loss the most, and are we about to really see it this time of year?
I think it's exactly what they hired him to do, is in late in close games when the Bills have a lead and they're trying to get the ball back to put the game away. Von Miller has shown up defensively. He gets a timely sack when they need it. He pressures the quarterback into an interception when they need it. Now, certainly this is a team that only lost 3 games during the regular season, and all 3 of them were by 3 or fewer points. So, and Von Miller was there in a lot of games that put them on the side of the victory. In the last waning moments of the Kansas City game, Von Miller forces Mahomes into the waiting arms of Matt Milano to force the interception. It's just his presence on the field, no question, will be felt. But I think also one of the things that he has brought to the table is his leadership and his coaching. He's got an enormous amount of credibility in the locker room. He brought in a duplicate of the Lombardi Trophy to the locker room and showed the guys and said, hey, listen, you said you would do anything for this. Well, what about it? He's in meetings with these guys and constantly telling them, not to blink, giving them not only technical information to his fellow D-line mates, his defensive ends, a core of defensive ends the Bills have, but he's also it's a mindset of a champion that has done it twice with 2 different teams. So he has been an incredible leader still, even in the fact that he's been injured. He's been in the building quite a bit every day helping these guys. And without him on the field, certainly they're going to feel that loss. But I think his leadership has given and led the young defensive ends on this team to play better than they have in the past.
So we likely won't talk to you next week. What do you think of the neutral site aspect of what could be Bills and Chiefs in Atlanta?
I could go on and on about it. I get the reasoning for it. The canceled game, you knew when they were going to start tinkering with it, you knew it would never be fair. And certainly the Bengals have an enormous beef with what was taken away from them. And the Chiefs shouldn't have too much to complain about in the fact that they were given a bye week in the playoffs. The Bills were robbed of the opportunity to get the number 1 seed, something that they held going into that Monday night game. So you knew it was, not everybody was going to be happy with the decisions that were made after that game was canceled. But I think that the neutral site championship games, I hate to say it like this, but I think it's a matter of time before it's a norm. Most people don't realize that the Super Bowl sites are not chosen quite at random. Those host cities put a bid in to the National Football League, and we're talking about money. I would say it's the same difference for the TV people. They don't care where the game is played. It's going to be the same television audience one way or the other. The only people that care are the two teams that would actually earn those championship home games, and that's 30 other franchises that don't really care that year. And it's a chance for the league to put those championship sites out for bid. So when you put it that way, I think it's only a matter of time. I could be wrong. The football guys may say, no way, you should be able to earn a championship game in your stadium. But it's been my experience that if there's a way to bring more attention and more eyes toward a game, a neutral site game may be a way to do it. And if it is going to happen like that, I think the league will take advantage of it. So I think these neutral site championship games are probably, in my opinion, an inevitability.
Yeah, Pro Football Talk has a story right now. The headline is, the NFL is telling us without telling us that neutral site conference championship games may become the norm. How much does that devalue home field advantage when you eliminate a big step in that process, which would be the ability to host a conference championship game for teams? Does that change at all the mindset in the last couple weeks of the season if you don't get home field advantage throughout for a team that gets the number one seed? I know the bye is also in play with that number one seed, but what do you think about that, Steve?
The bye is I think the holy grail of the whole thing is the bye week.
Yeah.
Certainly the bye comes with home field. Okay, I get that. And home field is an enormous advantage, but a bye week at that time of year is huge. Home field does make a huge difference. If you're looking for an equitable way to decide, and certainly the regular season should have a say in who what advantages you can earn with the regular season. But if you're just earning the right to go to the playoffs, I think it will devalue a number of games at the end of the season, knowing that you can't get the one seed. Let's start resting our guys and take our bye week that we're not going to get early and go to the neutral site game fresh. I think there's a little bit of that could possibly do it, although the wild card in the divisional rounds being at home, that's a huge factor that will help a lot of teams. But there are some games, particularly in this divisional round, that are so tightly contested, home field is the difference. So if you put those two teams on a neutral site, you may get a different result. And that's really the crucial factor that we're talking about. Impossible to quantify that, which teams it would help, which teams it wouldn't help. But I think it's a real thing that needs to be considered.
Steve Tasker, our guest. Excuse me, Steve. In terms of if we were ranking hierarchy for fans, just naming off NFL head coaches, I'm not sure where Sean McDermott would be listed, but I know he would be underrated. What is his top quality, and why do you think we overlook him as a football public so often when ranking the coaches in the NFL currently?
You're talking about Sean McDermott?
Yes. I
think one of the things, the reason he gets overlooked, you look back and there are other years where he probably should have gotten coach of the year before this year. He's an outstanding coach. I think in 2017 when he took over and took a team that had been in a drought from the playoffs for 17 years, and just before the start of the season made a couple of trades and were openly accused of tanking by the media, and to get that roster to the playoffs for the first time in 17 years after being accused of tanking, that's a coach of the year in my eyes. In 2020, the COVID year, when this team sprouted into a 12-4, 13-3 team, that was also another year. This one, with a mass shooting in Buffalo in the Top store here in Buffalo, May 14th, to the loss of the sibling of one of the players. Dawson Knox lost his younger brother, Luke, a college football player, passed away in his dorm room. Then we had a massive storm here in Buffalo over Thanksgiving weekend, and another one over Christmas that cost 40-plus people their lives. There's this community and this fan base and this team, and you guys know this, when you're in an NFL team, but particularly one the size of Buffalo, in a market the size of Buffalo, the team plays an enormous role in public sentiment and what the team's and what that city's heart is. And the team lived up to a great responsibility they have for unifying and being a leading voice in the healing and processing of these tragedies. In a conjunction with that, they're in the middle of a football season where they're the Super Bowl favorite and trying to win games every week. Sean McDermott has navigated his team through it. And then, of course, the Damar Hamlin incident 3 weeks ago, an unprecedented move in leadership by Zach Taylor and, of course, Sean McDermott to say, listen, our teams are not prepared to continue with this game. Unprecedented in NFL history. And the league, to its credit, said, good call, we back you. Go ahead. We're going to call this game. We're going to cancel it. Huge amount of leadership in that moment, not only by Sean McDermott, but by Zach Taylor, by Terry Pagula, Mike Brown and their family, and the league. It was really difficult and unprecedented moment in NFL history, and Sean deserves a lot of a lion's share of the credit for that. So yes, all of these things happened this year. These are the reasons why he should be considered as one of the great head coaches. But I think the guys who are driving the fastest race car don't get credit for being the best driver. And I think that's where a lot of people who just casually follow it, find Sean McDermott.
Steve Tasker has been our guest. He's live from One Bills Live there in Buffalo and Western New York. Great to have you on, Steve. Hopefully we'll catch up. Maybe a Radio Row. Who knows? If you're out there with the Bills, yeah, it'd be nice. We'll catch up there again. And again, thank you for the perspective as always.
America's team. Thanks, Steve.